When creating an architectural model in SketchUp, and this is true for a new design or for when you're just trying to model a design that already exists, you often create it in the simplest possible geometric form. Basically, what it means is you're creating shells that have no wall thickness. And here I have a simple residential model, kind of a Cape Cod house, and I'll turn on X-ray so you can kind of see through it. And what you'll see is I've created this out of a bunch of simple shapes, basically boxes, and each of these boxes is a group on its own. Okay, I created it out of this one. And even these little dormers, if I hide the rest of the model, I just have a keyboard shortcut for hiding it. You can see it's basically a little box. And the advantage of this is, let's say I want to, I don't know, make a change. Maybe I want to, I don't know, put this on the other side of the building. I can come in here and quickly rotate this dormer, and I'll just type in 180 to get it on the opposite side. And by using these simple shapes and making them each kind of unique groups, that kind of operation becomes really simple. It's just a matter of rotating. Nothing gets all sticky. Now, there is a disadvantage to that, which is sooner or later you actually need to make a floor plan which shows the interior of the model. And unless you live in a virtual world, walls have thicknesses, floors have thicknesses, even foundations have thicknesses. So we need to use those special tools that SketchUp has to give us some wall thickness, but there's a little bit of strategy involved as well. For example, roofs tend to, it's easier if they're all kind of connected to each other. So we want to merge these dormers with the base model of the building. As you'll see, it's much easier to create the roof thickness. And same with the foundations. There's two parts to the foundation here. I just basically made them as separate groups because the foundation is kind of a structurally independent in wood-framed buildings. So we're going to want to combine those for the ease of creating a new model. So how do we do that? Well, the first step that you're going to want to do, save your model. Always a good idea to save your main model. And I have this as a whole model with my building site in it. And I've even created some tags in here to turn on and off the site and the building if I need to. Oh, except that's my current layer. All right, I can't do that. And I don't want to lose any of that, but I want to work on this building in isolation. And the easiest way to do that is to select all the pieces that make up the building. And rather than hide the other layers, I'm just going to make this a component, first of all, and I'll just call it building because I'm not very creative. And then when it's a component, you can save it out as a separate file. Just right-click on it and choose Save As. And I'll save it into my folder for this particular project. And just be sure not to name it anything different than the original component. And SketchUp will give you that as the default. So I'll hit Save, and now I can open up that file. There it is. And of course, I do want to make sure to save any changes I've made. I thought I saved it, but maybe I forgot. So don't mess up your site and everything. And now you'll see that the model is completely independent. Okay, and I have my dormers. I even have like a little light pipe on the other side, a little domed skylight. So how do we combine these pieces? Well, SketchUp does provide as native tools some solids tools. I'll just drag those down here. There's any number of them, but the simple one is going to be just select the objects and you can create an outer shell. And this will look at the geometry, and here I'll put it in X-ray mode so we can see what happens. Oh, and let me add in my funky little skylight there. And you can see now there's all this extra geometry. I click the outer shell tool, and like magic, all that extra interior geometry is all gone. It's just, like it says, the outer shell. And FYI, these tools, these solids tools, are really great. You can add or subtract solid objects, they have to be what's called a manifold, which is to say there's no gaps. If you dumped water in these shapes, the water would not be allowed to leak out, or else the tools won't work. And there are some specialized tools that you can get from the extension warehouse that works on components, but right now I have all these, I'm just using the standard ones, and they have to work with only groups. So for example, if I wanted to create a dome space, there's a number of ways that I could do it, but the easiest way is I just downloaded a sphere, and I can use the subtract tool, and let me just deselect by clicking off of that sphere, click the subtract tool, and what it'll say down at the bottom, you can see it's telling you, and the cursor is telling you, select the first object, which is the cutter, and then it says select the second object. And so long as your box is a group, click on that one, and like magic, you've eaten away at that building. And sometimes it's easier to create geometry through subtraction in this way rather than by adding things together. But of course you can add things together as well. Back at our building, we're going to want to combine pieces together, but we're going to want to think about which ones really make sense. And for instance, these foundation walls kind of make sense to combine together, but I think maybe I'm going to keep these others separate just for convenience to show you two different methods for creating wall thickness. So for the foundation wall, I can just use the shell tool, and I've actually already selected them, so I just click them and it should create one independent shell. I'll type H to hide it. Now, because the top surface here is going to actually overlap with the bottom surface of the upper model, I'm going to just delete this. And one simple way to create wall thickness, and this is kind of the best for easy and simple models, is to use the good old offset tool. I'll just click offset, create the wall thickness by just basically inserting an interior shape on the plan. I'll make it about 10 inches, which is typical for kind of a residential wall. And then I can just push-pull that up to the top of the space here. Now, of course, I do need a bottom thickness. I can push-pull down another, say, 10 inches to get the thickness of my foundation. And you might notice, by the way, when I do this, you see how I actually push-pulled just that outer surface, so I've actually kind of still just got a shell model here. Sometimes you do need to tap the control key. That gives me a teeny tiny little plus sign next to my cursor, and that will make a copy when I push-pull. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't, but like I mentioned, you kind of want this to be an open bathtub for a foundation wall. We'll just click outside the box to return to the model. Now this offsetting works really great for simple plan objects, but when you get to things that are more complicated like this roof, suddenly it gets a lot harder to even figure out what to offset. Or push-pull, for example, you can't really push-pull very easily because you get these weird gaps in different pieces. So we don't want to do that, but what we can do is take advantage of the extension warehouse and SketchUp's ability to be extended with additional tool sets. Now, the extension warehouse, that's on the warehouse toolbar, which may or may not be on your screen. That it comes with the, I think, default tool set. And the extension warehouse is a great place to get extensions for your SketchUp model. I'll just call it up real quick, and you can type in different things here, including solids, geometry, and you'll be able to find different tools. For example, this solids inspector will look for holes in your model. So if you're trying to use the standard solid tools and they're not working because you don't have a valid solid, you can use that to find where the holes are. And this Eneroth solids tool is another great one that works with components. However, the biggest library of potential extensions and plugins is on a website called SketchUcation. And boy, they have a lot of plugins here. You go to their plugin store. You do have to log in, and some of them are, yes, not free. I know it's hard to even imagine having to pay more for your plugins. But there's a lot of really cool ones in here. One writer of these, Frito6, is a terrific coder who seems to be able to create all sorts of interesting different kinds of things, including Curveloft, which makes kind of soap bubbles, I think, if I remember correctly, and Frito Corner, which kind of softens them. But the one that we're going to look for is this one here, JointPushPull Interactive. And it kind of describes what it does here. And sometimes you can go and click through and get some tutorials. There are so many extensions. If you're doing something like space planning or theatrical lighting or who knows what, there's plugins out there that can help you to do your job. In this case, the Frito6 is terrific. And the way that Sketchucation typically works is you actually have to download a whole bunch of extensions. In this case, there's the extension store that connects to your account, and then you can go into the extension store and search for the Frito6. You can find all of the tools that they wrote, and then download it onto your computer. And then sometimes they need additional supporting libraries and things like that. So you can download them all and manage them all using that. And then when that is done, you can just call up the SketchUp, the new toolbar called Frito6 JointPushPull. And sometimes you have to restart SketchUp for everything to take effect. Operating the tool could not be simpler. You just select the surfaces that you want to manipulate. Here we go. I'll grab these dormers. I'll even grab the back roof and maybe even this dome piece. And it doesn't always work the first time, but I'll just click the push-pull, the 3D push-pull tool, and what it will do, it creates brand spanking new geometry from what you had, and you can even type in a number, say 10 inches for roof thickness, and there you go, you've got yourself a roof. Now, it doesn't always work perfectly. For example, let me view my hidden geometry. You might see that it actually has triangulated a couple of surfaces. So I don't know why sometimes it does that. This one, for example, I can't push-pull it until I get rid of that extra bit of geometry. See, this one will not push-pull. But I think that in general, you can usually find a way to make this tool work very effectively. And this tool is so great, I'm going to try using it for my interior of this kind of Cape Cod house. And again, you just select the surfaces you want to kind of multi-extrude and click the Joint Push Pull button. And you can jointly push-pull them. Hopefully I can get the direction correctly. It does look like it's acting a little weird, but let's give the wall some wall thickness, about 6 inches. It does look like it may have done some weird extruding that I don't like. But in general, that's looking pretty good. And if we take a look from above, let me turn off some of that hidden geometry, a little distracting. You can see that we've got pretty much wall thickness throughout. If it's giving you problems, you may do better to just do a few surfaces at a time. And of course, I'm going to need it to come in and clean in this inner floor thickness. Floor joists are typically 2x8s or 2x10s, whereas exterior walls are typically 2x6s. Again, tweakiness is what we're all about. But this certainly gets you a very nice looking model. As I mentioned, the tool is not always perfect, so you do sometimes have to come in and do some cleanup. It will sometimes leave little bits of extra lines, for example. Let me just erase this extra line. And then this front corner, you can see something has gone horribly wrong. Sometimes you can kind of push-pull your way out of this. Sometimes you have to actually come and draw lines to make up for what essentially was a mistake in the geometric modeling here, and try to get it correct. Again, sometimes you'll spend more time trying to fix all these bits and pieces than you will just redrawing something a little simpler and seeing if maybe you were off a little bit in your initial modeling of that simple geometric shape. So now we've got this beautiful architectural model, including the foundation wall. We could create our floor plans right here in this model and not have to deal with the site. However, there may be some design elements that you need to think about that are related to connecting the interior and the exterior. So let's save this model. I'll just hit the save button, and I'm going to open up my site model and load this in. And doing that is pretty simple. You just find your original component, and this is why it was probably a good idea to have saved before closing this model. Then you can just right-click on it and choose Reload. That will open up your menu. You can browse for your file and choose Open, and like magic, there is your new building. Now that we've got our whole model back together again, we want to follow good SketchUp architectural modeling practices, which is to say you're going to want to create a number of saved scenes for your project. And I'll go over here to my scenes palette, and I have one for the overview, and this is great, as you're operating, maybe you want to save a few of these to quickly navigate the exterior of the model. Here, I'll create this one and call it Overview 2. But you also want to create things like site plans and floor plans. And I like to open up the Standard Views menu. Just because I like to have the pictures here on the little icons to help me know what I'm looking at. And of course, the top view, if I go to the top view here, you can see that I've got the whole site visible. And I've also got my site plan, but I'm in perspective. So I want to go and make this parallel projection. And now I've got a wonderful site plan. Of course, there's no contours or anything, so that background site isn't helping me a huge amount. But you'll want to save that as a scene. Just having the overall site plan in this orthographic view is so helpful. But you also want to create a floor plan. And again, I'm doing this with the site here visible. I'll create my section plane. I'll use my arrow key to force it to go down and click in the middle of the plan here, middle of the model. I'll call this my plan, section plane. And then I'll just go to the top view, and there you go. You've got yourself a nice floor plan, and I'll add this as a scene. Okay? Now, one thing to notice, when you have section planes active, then this is always the complicated thing with scenes and styles, is every scene has a style associated with it. And a style is the feature of SketchUp that remembers all the visual settings. Now, I've just turned on section planes, so I want to make a new style which has those section planes active. And click Create Scene, and I'll call it Floor Plan. But let me take a look at my Styles menu and show you what I mean by this, which is if I go here to Select and just select the styles that are in my model, right now this current style is the one that's active. And I can tell that because it's kind of highlighted. If I go to the Site Plan, you can see the other style is activated. And I'm going to go here. Let's go back to the Floor Plan. I'm going to rename it just by selecting it here in the Styles menu, and I'll call it Section Planes On. And the big thing here, and you can click this little recycle button so that it remembers what you just did. The big thing here is that you want to have a style where the section planes are on and one where they're not cutting away at different surfaces. And the nice thing about having a style like that is, let's say I want to cut another section, but this time cut a section, but make this a vertical section. Maybe we'll, here, let's cut the other direction through the building, maybe through one of the dormers, and we'll call this section, whatever, east-west. And in this view, what's nice is I can use that same style, and it will cut through the model. And again, I can use one of these saved scenes here, these saved views, to work with the model. And I'll just give myself a new scene for this view as well, and I'll just call it, building section 1. Go. Now, one thing that's fun about using these styles, if you find this kind of thing fun, is that you can edit them. And for example, the section fill, what goes inside what SketchUp detects as a color, you can change that. You can change it to let's make it red, for example. And that can be a really nice look, a kind of stylish look. You don't have to do that, and in all likelihood, we will be rendering our floor plans using a plug-in renderer, but for now, you can get a really cool look like that, and you can even control how thick the lines are that are defining the kind of boundary around the cut portion of the walls. And these changes, if you click the Recycle button in the Styles menu here, we'll just click Recycle. When I go to the Building section, you can see that the changes are reflected. Now, I'm having a little problem with the Building section. As you can see, it's cutting through the foundation walls fine, it's cutting through some of the exterior walls fine, but it's not cutting through the window. It's filling the entire upper portion of the building. And, well, first of all, I can just turn off section fill, and what happens is it will just show me the edges of the building. You can also try to make this wall have some thickness here. This wall at the dormer, I think, is the one that's the problem, just by using push-pull and probably cleaning up some joints here to make it look correct. And then the fill should work properly. And you can see here by repairing those windows, then I was able to get the section fill to look correct. It does look like there may be some other strange little kind of odd things that may have occurred because of my multi-push-pull feature. Some of these things you might be able to fix in SketchUp by figuring out where that little wedge shape is. You could also just, unless it's absolutely critical, you could just ignore it and fix it in Photoshop later on. We'll have to see when we go to render how that looks. Now, one problem you may run into when you have a complicated site plan like I have that's made of push-pulled or smoothed geometry using the sandbox tools is that the site, your floor plans are going to look a little weird because your site wasn't cut away. This is my basement floor plan, and you can see that my site is throwing everything off. So I'm going to want to go and let's go to one of our overviews. I'm going to turn off my building, and I'm just going to use a kind of shape that I created out of the original shape of the basement and cut away my existing site. Now, it's not so easy, and I probably should have done this earlier just to make sure that my site cut and fill works. But to cut site geometry that's made using this particular tool, the sandbox tool, you are actually going to have to give it some thickness. There's probably no easy way to do that, but I'll just do it using lines. I'll force them to go in the blue direction so that I get a nice vertical depth to this. And by kind of locking the inference of the direction of the line, I can pretty much finish off the base of this model, and then I should be able to use my solids tools to fill it all in. One thing you'll want to make sure, one, obviously follow with the axes. You always want to follow along with the axes. But then also, if there's any stray lines, I just spotted this one. I think I drew this by mistake. You want to get rid of those because they will prevent the solids tools from working. Otherwise, this looks like a nice big solid slice of site, and I'll use my solids tools to cut it away. And the solids tools, if you remember, are pretty simple. You click the subtract tool, click the object you want to go and be the cutter, and then you click on the site. And there you go. And if you want to create, say, a level area in front of the building or behind it, you could use another shape with a flat bottom to create it. And now our sections should look correct. There's our section. Let's check out the basement floor plan. And there you go. You can see that part of the basement is actually underground. That may be a little annoying, so you can also just not show the site on this particular view. Just make sure that your site is on the correct layer. And there we go. I've turned off the site on this particular view. And then if you've made any changes to this basement plan scene, in this case I've turned off a layer, don't forget to update your scene, and that way it'll remember that you turned the site off. One last little piece of modeling advice is that as you are working on your project, I recommend taking advantage of the tag system, which is akin to the layer system in AutoCAD, to keep objects organized. And partly it's you want to make sure that it's easy to track them down if you lose them, but also it does make it easy if you need to hide things. So for example, I have made myself a furnishings layer, and I've made it my current layer, and that way anything that I bring in here, I'm going to bring in a nice furniture group, it'll come in on that layer. And if you forget, you can always go to Entity Info and make sure that it's on the correct layer. These objects will disappear when you deactivate the section, of course, or when you go to the basement plan. But it just also makes it easy in case for some reason you're like, oh, I want to change the flooring pattern. I can just quickly turn off the furnishings if they're not my current layer. There we go. Turn it off and on. Okay, and you can save views with and without the furniture on them. The other thing that is good modeling practice for interiors is to create the interior partitions as groups. And the reason for this is, let's say I want to create a wall here in my living room, okay? And let me go back to perspective view because it's a little easier to work in the interior when you have a little bit more visibility. So for example, if I want to create an interior partition, maybe I'll draw it here on this wall, and I'll type in comma and 5 to make it only 5 inches thick. And I can push pull that wall up a little bit. Let me double click on it, or triple click on it, and make it a group. And the reason I'm doing this, first of all, I'm going to want to edit this and make it a little taller, and I don't want it to get stuck on anything else. So let's make this, I don't know, 6 feet taller. I don't remember how high my ceilings are. But then I can hide the rest of the model, and especially if I don't have section planes on, I can easily say, oh, I don't know, create an opening in this wall. I don't have to worry about the rest of the model being in the way. Okay, and this is super handy. I can close this. There we go. I've made myself a nice partition, and of course it's a little low, so I can push pull it up. And again, I don't know how high my ceiling height is here. And this is why I love being able to toggle the rest of my model so that I can make it easier to see what I'm doing. Anyway, there we go. I've got my model. Also, if you are doing it with this method, let's say you want to add a sidewall to this object, and this object, I always go back and forth about what layer to put it on, but I'm going to leave it on the furnishings layer. And the reason is I can now hide the entire building, hide the site, and now I can kind of just work on my furnishings and the partitions. I somehow find that these interior partitions are more related to the furnishings than they are to the kind of building volume. Anyway, and now let's say I want to go, I don't want to see my site, my section, so I can just go to the View toolbar, turn off section cuts. Now I have a nice clean view of my model, and I can put in other things. I could put in, say, a window or a door, or I could even draw on this object that is my wall. Again, type in, click a rectangle, and then I can type in 5, comma. If I don't put in the second dimension, it'll just make that first one 5, and now I can push pull this little piece 5 feet. So you can kind of start to quickly create a kind of, I don't know, rabbit's warren of interior spaces. Obviously, it's nice sometimes to be able to see the rest of the model as you're working. I can also copy an edge here. I'm just going to click the Move Copy command, type Control, and then use my keypad to change the dimension of the copy. And now I've got another wall. So you can quickly develop your project to have quite a lot more in it than just your basics. The problem is seeing what you're doing. So going back to my floor plan now, I can start to see my project take shape. It's very difficult, but having things like the roof on a separate layer and having the I've even seen modeling where the first floor and the second floor are on separate layers. That way you can turn them on and off without having to hide objects, which is kind of a pain. And that is how you can efficiently create a floor plan from your site kind of massing and outline model fairly quickly, fairly easily, but it does require a lot of organization in your models.